To be publicly denying any rift, but that's not how Newsweek magazine's behind-the-scenes election team tells it in its special election project. Reporter Connolly followed John McCain's campaign for more than a year, and she joins me now from Washington to talk more about it. Good morning, Katie.
Good morning. How
bad were things between the McCain and Palin camps? I mean, we see them trying to paper it over in public. Even she recently said, hey, things were great, but what was it really like behind the scenes?
You know, from what I understand, initially the relationship between Sarah Palin and Senator McCain was really quite good. They enjoyed each other's company. But as the campaign progressed, it was no secret that they didn't really know each other particularly well. And towards the end of the campaign, they were really only speaking about once a week. She'd become far more assertive in some of her social views as well, which don't exactly match John McCain's social views, to the extent that she didn't want to appear on stage with people, Republican candidates, people like John Sununu and Jeb Bradley, who didn't agree with her on some of these views. And she refused to acknowledge them when they were on stage with her.
But what about this idea that we hear from these unnamed sources in the McCain camp that she really was unprepared and that a lot of the negative things that were said about her were in fact true?
I mean, I do get the sense that she was quite unprepared, but one of the things that was a source of frustration for McCain aides was that she began to resist their preparation efforts, that she didn't want to engage with them. After her Charlie Gibson interview, she refused to be prepared properly for her Katie Couric interview, and that obviously had quite disastrous results for her.
Well, what about, I mean, okay, then the flip side of that coin is this idea that she felt that she was mishandled, that they were trying to control her too much, that they were trying to make her into somebody else. Her people single out Nicole Wallace and Steve Schmidt as being people who just didn't know how to handle her properly.
You know, I'm not without sympathy for her here. It's an enormous thing to go from being a governor of a state that's quite remote to being thrust on the national stage. You know, she was probably exposed to a whole range of very tight handling that she'd never been exposed to before, and I'm sure that's very difficult. But I think the thing about Sarah Palin is part of her appeal was that she's headstrong, she's a maverick, she's all these things. And when you pick a maverick to go on your ticket, she's going to do some things that are kind of mavericky, right? She's not going to do what she's told, and she's not going to appreciate being told what to do 24/7. So in some ways it should have been a little bit anticipated that she wasn't going to take direction the way some other candidates might want to.
Yeah, it really is the job, though, of the vice presidential running mate to do what they're told, to get out there and just, you know, faithfully articulate the message and attack the opposition. That's traditionally what the role has been.
Yeah, well, and she certainly played her role in attacking the opposition. Right. I don't think there's any doubt about that.
You know, some of your reporting, we hear more about the clothing flap that erupted in the last week of the campaign. According to Newsweek magazine, this went far beyond $150,000?
Yeah, well, what I've heard from a couple of reliable sources within the campaign is that they found out late last week, so a few days before the election, that the spending was a lot more significant than was originally reported, and that she'd perhaps spent between $20,000 and $40,000 on clothes for her husband, that she'd perhaps spent between $20,000 and $35,000 on clothing for her children, and that she'd actually spent a lot more than she'd owned up to. And I think the source of the deepest frustration for them was that after she went on stage and said publicly that she was, denounced the clothes, said that they were brought to her room and that she didn't ask for them, that up to a week after that point, she was still ordering clothes and still having them brought to her. And I think that people were very frustrated by learning that quite late in the piece.
So all of this is coming, Katie, from anonymous sources. You know, if things are this bad, if people feel this strongly about it, why don't they go on the record? Why are they staying anonymous?
You know, I think what we're seeing is at the end of the campaign, people were very exhausted and they were exasperated and they were venting. And they were venting to me because they knew my project wasn't going to be aired until after the election. And I'm not sure that people want to drag this out. You know, I think they want to leave it in the past, and I don't think that they want to. I know that the narrative has become that Palin is a scapegoat. I don't think they were scapegoating her. I think that people knew they were in a very bad Republican environment. I think they knew they were facing strong headwinds. And at the end of the campaign, they were expressing some frustration, and I think that's kind of to be expected.
Yeah, as a White House correspondent myself, I use plenty of unnamed sources, but it would be good to see some of these people go on the record for a change when they're saying things like this.
It'd make our jobs a lot easier.
All right, Connolly for us this morning. Katie, good to see you. Thanks so much.
Thank you, John.